Hi, welcome to another episode of Salka's Soapbox. So today we have Rocco LaDuca on with us. Rocco's got a lot of great history with the area and is one of the hosts on the Talk of the Town on 100.7 in out of Utica. Rocco, thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me to your Salka Soapbox. I like that.
This is kind of a little reversal in the roles here because usually I'm on the show with you,
right,
and Jay and Mark. But again, I want to thank you for being here today. And if you could just give us a little information on your background.
Well, like I mentioned before, I enjoy the opportunity for people to ask me questions. So feel free to ask me anything. I ask you anything I want, and I extend that offer to you. But I've had a journalism career for about 17 years or so. I got my master's degree at the Newhouse School of Journalism at Syracuse University in 2004, and then came here for my first job in journalism at the Observer-Dispatch newspaper in Utica, where I covered crime and the police beat and trials and things for about 10 years. And so I covered several hundred murders and things like that. So a lot of my experiences in the criminal justice system and whatnot. And then I took a little hiatus from journalism. I worked with Senator Griffo for a few years, about a little under 3 years as his communications director. So I learned a lot about Albany and state politics and issues and things. And I really do believe that helped put me in a good position with my years of journalism plus a few years at the politic level to be able to do a talk show. I've never been in radio before, and I was asked if I wanted to do a radio talk show with a couple other guys, Mark and Jay. And who would turn down a chance to have a voice for 4 hours every morning to talk about all sorts of things? So it's been a great experience. And in the past, I've been doing that almost 4 years now. It'll be 4 years. And we've just covered so many crazy things that have happened in the past few years, including the Trump presidency, the coronavirus, the election. There's so many things. And then this issue with Cuomo now. There's more than enough to talk about. So that's essentially what kind of thrust me into journalism. I've covered a lot. I've talked about a lot. And that's what makes it so exciting, to be able to meet a lot of people like you and to be able to ask questions and have people on that can that open themselves to these types of debates and questions is a really great opportunity. So I'm glad to do it.
Yeah, we're glad to have you here. Media, radio, TV, newspaper, now, of course, the predominant one is the internet, has an awesome responsibility to give people information. And sometimes they hit the mark and sometimes they don't. What kind of changes have you seen, not even in the recent past, but kind of over the long run, what's going on with journalism now? Because a lot of people are somewhat distrustful of what the media says. Depends. Yeah. Some people listen to Fox, some people listen to CNN. I mean, what's your take on what journalism has evolved into?
Well, I'm still fairly young, and I can still remember my first few years of journalism school, where I would still go, and on campus they would give out. You'd have stacks of the New York Times for people to get, for students to get for free. There were no cell phones. There were no websites for newspapers, really. If you wanted to read the news, you really went and bought a newspaper, and they were cheap back then, like $1.50 or whatever. And that's what really got me interested in journalism, is that you just opening a newspaper, reading these stories, seeing the big headlines. I love big headlines on newspapers, and knowing that's where you really would get the sense of what were important issues or not. I didn't really get a sense of bias or partisanship in the news that I read. I didn't really understand that. That's not how I was taught in journalism school. I was taught to be objective and neutral. So then when I went to start in my journalism career at the Utica newspaper, I took very seriously to be objective and check your facts, have multiple sources, be careful of who you trust, and never use anonymous sources. At the OD, they never allowed anonymous sources. They always said, if the person's not going to tell you on the record, then just find somebody else.
Right.
You could always find somebody else. And that challenged you as a reporter to get your facts straight. And there was always the deadline pressure of having your story done by 5 or 6 o'clock. You knew you had all day to get your facts straight. There was really no big hurry to get out every piece of information you needed. So that was how I started. And just in the 10 years that I was at the paper, really, I saw that transition into suddenly I had to step out of court to call in updates that would be posted on online websites. And you kind of like, well, why do I have to leave what I'm doing in the middle of? And they can wait till read it in the newspaper the next day. But no, that was the movement. That was the progress of journalism at the time, that everybody was starting to do that, where you wanted to be the first then. And that was before still social media, Facebook and Twitter and everything. But it was the point of getting things online. And I didn't really like that because I wanted to know that I had a chance to get all my facts straight and my story in line by a deadline. But suddenly when journalism started to transition into getting out as much as you can as soon as you can, I wasn't really comfortable with that. I found myself kind of still waiting back a little bit until I had something really to say. Sure. Because you would see over and over again, people would just post things that you didn't necessarily know where they were coming from. You didn't know if it was true or not. And then suddenly you would follow what that person was saying, and you would start chasing social media hits and tweets and comments instead of just doing what journalism should do and say, sit back, wait till you get all your information, and then tell everybody what you know. And so I found myself it became very easy, whether it was me or other journalists, to kind of fall into that trap where everybody was just saying everything they knew without any sense of direction. And I think that created the opportunity for a lot of mistakes, a lot of misinformation, a lot of backtracking. And ultimately, then when you put in the factor of the public being able to comment and the divisions that both sides would start to fight over, suddenly every fact that was thrown out there before you really had a chance to digest it was kind of like chum in the water for all sides to go fight over. And I just think it created so much hysteria in the media world that it never allowed people, reporters, the public to calm down and to just take in what they were hearing in a more deliberate basis. And that, I think, is unfortunate because even I catch myself, you get caught up in the moment of talking about what you just heard on Twitter or in the headline, and then an hour later, the facts change. So what you said doesn't really apply.
Yeah, it's almost like you're dealing much more now with emotion than you are with people that had the time or the desire to sit down and look at the facts. And I always looked at journalism. I was the editor of the college newspaper at MVCC. It was called The Student Voice, way back in the early 80s. As a matter of fact, I had a subscription to the New York Times that the college paid for because, we were the newspaper.
Right.
And I remember having stacks and stacks of New York Times. And you looked at this classic newspaper as a source of what you assumed was accurate information that was well balanced, but now that doesn't seem to be to be quite the case now. It seems to be that journalism now is again playing on those emotions. It's being used more and more for a political tool, and I have to admit it's encouraging to someone like yourself who has an attitude that we need to have a little bit more pensive attitude, if you will, about how we get the facts and how we're able to derive our own opinions based on what the facts. And again, we know that there's a big distrust factor right now for the media, and that's a dangerous situation because the media is our main source of information. And I think it's an awesome responsibility that people like yourself have to be able to deliver those messages so that we can get a clear-cut picture of what's going on. And people are afraid right now. Yeah. They're angry and they're afraid with the pandemic and everything else that's going on in Washington and Albany. I mean, look at what this debacle we have with our governor right now. I mean, what's your take on that anyway?
There are so many issues that you've raised, whether it's what happened with the sexual harassment allegations, if there was anybody in a staff that was complicit in any way or in enabling. Who are those people? What did they really do? You're talking about the nursing home issues. What did the administration, the staff really know? The book deal, what did they know? So many things that I think if Cuomo just cuts loose and runs and there's no impeachment hearings and things like that, you could pretty much call it a day. And how much will you ever really know about what happened? And maybe there are people that are afraid for that information to come out. So I think the public to be able to move on, I think would be in the interest of the state to just have a fresh start. I think everybody's desperate for that. But I also think that there would be a lost opportunity to try to maybe really realize and understand how bad, hypothetically, I mean, I don't know, how bad the administration really was behind the scenes, who really knew what, and what was really done, or was it just hyper is it just a hyperbole, I guess, on the part of politics, really blowing up some of these issues bigger than they really were, and you find out there is no fire where there's smoke. And I think that's important to identify as well. If those criticizing Cuomo went too far in trying to suggest there was a bigger fire there than there really was. So maybe there would be some enlightenment if you had all the hearings and impeachment, or maybe right now, like you said, maybe everybody's just ready to come up for air and get rid of the stink, if that's what they want to call it.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's an interesting debate on both sides
Right.
of the issue. Granted, everybody wants this guy to be held accountable. Even the people that want him to resign want him to be held accountable. And from what I understand, there's a strong possibility, there's going to be some criminal charges, which just by resignation, he's not going to be able to escape. Where my concern is that people have relatively short memories. And it seemed to be that when the report came out on the nursing home deaths, it was quite disturbing, and then it just kind of lost its momentum. And the governor has a strategy. He likes to be able to buy time, like
Right.
any politician who's in trouble wants to buy time and rely on people's short memories to be able to let the steam out of the issue, so to speak.
Yeah. And I think a big question that I don't know the answer to is, where's he going to go stay? He doesn't have a
Right, he
house.
doesn't have a place to stay.
He's going to go live with his brother in the basement.
Yeah, maybe. I'm sure he'll find some place.
Right.
But Rocco, it's something that I think that is captured the attention of a lot of people. Of course, the number one issue on everybody's mind is still the pandemic, and now, of course, with this variant that's coming up, and we're heavily involved in the mask issue, with parents being able to have the decision of what to do, for and with their children, and so I mean we're. Sometimes it just seems like there's so much going on. It's almost overwhelming. And I think it's very, very important that people like myself and like yourself try to lower the pitch a little bit, although sometimes some people think we do just the opposite, but to just get the facts and to appeal to people's rationale instead of their emotion.
And I wanted to point out something. I think that's an important, what you just said there was an important factor in why small town, I call this small town compared to like national news media outlets, whether it's cable or like the New York Times or the Washington Post, that the small town papers where I started, like in Utica, is really where I think the most objective, neutral news is. I think when reporters like myself come out of journalism school, we have a chance to really stick to our ethics and stick to our objectivity when we're covering a local news. If you have that training. If you don't, then I think it's harder for people to understand how to be objective. I mean, we all have opinions, and unless you really understand what that means, it's hard to rein yourself in or to have that self-awareness. So I think what I've learned about just in my years of like working at the Utica paper is that small communities, I think news in those communities are much more important than the bigger headline papers.
All politics
and
is
cables.
local.
Right, because those, I think I see those as more businesses, corporate journalism, where you do have a boss and you do have bigger issues in politics that ultimately behind the scenes dictate where the agenda goes, and them trying to set the national agenda or perspective on a lot of issues, right or wrong. And that's just, you see that throughout history, that's ultimately what they would do. Small town newspapers are an opportunity for you really to understand what the public needs, what they're all about, what the elected officials and the community want to see happen on their streets, in their cities, with their elected officials. When you start in modern times, where you start to see that social media and the immediate, all these amateur news sources out there start to steal the thunder from small town papers, where they kind of shrivel up and they fade away and you only have a handful of reporters, I really do think that's where you start to see the fabric of communities start to fall apart, because you can go on Twitter all you want, but you're not going to get a good sense of what your community needs. And you don't have a reporter, or you don't have a media that's really telling their towns and the villages and the cities what should they really care about. And then you just wonder, if you go out into the street, into a community that doesn't have a thriving newspaper, how the hell do you know what's going on.
Right, you've got a bunch
Who's
of
right, who's wrong.
You've
Right.
got a bunch of armchair lawyers and armchair journalists and armchair doctors now, that are reading things on the internet, and they think they can be a trusted source
Right.
of this kind of information. And that's a precarious position to be in right now, because, like I said, the accuracy of the information and the focus of the information on the issue is one of the most important things. And I think you brought up some great points with that. I'm a local guy, so to speak. I was a town supervisor, and again, like I said, all politics is local, and people entrust an incredible amount of, or like to have an incredible amount of confidence in the information they're getting. So I feel the people that are in our positions have an awesome responsibility to get the story straight.
Right. And that's what I think you see happening where you have where social media becomes so easy for people to fire off what they think, that there's no, and I see this, I think on the radio, I try my best now to focus on at least accountability and really, really focusing on what our elected officials are doing, such as yourself or the county executive or the mayors or the governors or the state senators or the president even, is that in a local community, if you don't have an outlet that your elected officials fear, or not fear in a bad way, just realize that someone's watching them, someone's looking over their shoulder, that keep them honest, the tendency is to get sloppy. That's at least my sense. If you feel that you're not going to have your name in a big headline, or you're not going to have a big splash if you make a mistake, it's very easy to say, who's going to know about that? Or,
it's true.
Don't worry about it. Just go through it, go with it anyways. And that to me is very concerning when you talk about small towns like whether Oneida or Utica or Oneida County, if they don't have somebody who's really holding our powers to task, to accountability, then it's very easy, I think, to hit a downward slide.
And that's what we're kind of trying to do with this podcast, is to raise people's awareness to what's going on sometimes right underneath their nose. Because I think if they're given the proper information, they're going to make the right decisions. And see, that's the key element, because there's so much information coming at people, and especially again with the pandemic and very important issues to do with their health and to do with their family's health. Do they put masks on their kids? Do they get the vaccine? Is it social distancing really essential? There's just this huge wave of information coming at people, and we notice a lot of confusion. And this is what we're going to try to do again through these podcasts, is give some people the information. On my social media sites, a lot of times what I like to do is put down, especially during session, is put down a bill number and a brief description of what that bill does, and just get thoughts from people, and just to give them information. I've had more people come up to me on the street and through other means say, it's nice to know that we have someone who will give us just that smattering of information, and then we can make up our own minds. So, but Rocco, thank you very much for being here today. I hope to have you on again.
This is fun, and people are craving what I've learned in now more than ever. People are craving reliable sources for information.
They're hungry for it right now, and they just want the facts, and they're intelligent enough to make up their own minds. But again, when they're told this and told that, and who's got the scientific data or who's got the proof, we're just confusing a lot of these issues that I think these are critical issues that people need to have all the information on. And again, I want to thank you for being on this podcast with you. It's an honor to have you. And
well,
I'm
thanks
sure
for asking me. It's an honor to be asked to talk.
Well, thank you. Okay, thanks, Rocco.
All right,
Thank you for being here.
Thanks.